Hi guys. So I am going to really quickly go over what I did for my transportation project. I was fortunate enough to be able to teach it in a fourth grade classroom, and I recorded it, but not everybody followed directions, and I had quite a few kids that ended up in front of the camera. So unfortunately, I cannot share the video with you guys in the class. So I'll just kind of walk through what I did, what I changed, how it went, all that, and some takeaways that I had from it because I actually had quite a few takeaways after I did it. So really quickly, I have my transportation lined up right here. And so I started with this PowerPoint. If it'll load. So I made this PowerPoint, and it was basically like a guided PowerPoint, and you'll see when it all pops up. It's taking its dear time. There it is. So you'll see it when it all pops up. So this was my introduction slide. And then I assigned each kid a partner. I just pulled popsicle sticks with their names on them, and that's how I chose to assign their partners. So I assigned them a partner, and one partner from the group went and got a Chromebook. They actually already had Chromebooks from a different activity they had done before this, so we just said, one partner, keep your Chromebook. And then they only need one for both of them, and then I just told them to get on Google and wait for instructions. So I just had them log on to the Google homepage and just wait for directions. I had them all look at me when they were done. That way I knew who was still working on it and who was not. So then my next slide was there was no way for me to directly link them to the game. So I went into Google and I foolproofed it. I did it on my Mac. I did it on a Windows. I did on everything I possibly had in my house. And it worked the same every time. So I had them go directly to bestschoolgames.com. And I had them scroll to the bottom of the page, and in green was a means of transportation game. And it actually had sound on it, so I made them turn off the sound on their computers. And I wanted each kid to play a whole round and then record their score, and that's not exactly how it worked, but that's okay. So they actually decided to switch on and off. So one partner would answer all the questions for air, and another partner would answer all of them for land. So it wasn't a big deal. It was more just the fact that it was getting done. And then I told them when they were finished, they could quietly talk with their partner. However, when they were playing this game, they really loved it. So one of the girls was like, Miss Todd, I don't even know how you found this game. So they really enjoyed it, and they were really engaged, and they were laughing, and I can't believe I missed it. And they really, really loved this game. And I was a little worried because my lesson plan was designed for third grade, and I taught it in the fourth grade. So I was a little concerned they were going to be like, this is stupid. But they actually did really well. But I forgot when I did this that when you get the questions right, you get to play a mini game at the end. And so they kept playing it over and over and over in the 5 minutes to see how many mini games they could get to play. So they really enjoyed that. And so they did really well with this game. So then I had each of these things pop up individually. So I had this pop up, and it said, how many modes of transportation did you see? I called on a student. They told me 3. So then we clicked it. And so on and so forth. So basically for each one, I had each one appear on click. And so as I clicked it, the question would pop up and then the answer. They caught a couple that I actually missed. So I didn't put all of them in the PowerPoint. I just did the top 3, but there was actually 4 or 5 for each mode. So they were actually like, oh, Miss Stallard, you missed one. So they were really engaged with it. So this is how I guided their learning, was through this PowerPoint, and we just did class discussion about it. We talked about different things. So they really, really, really loved this. So for my next thing, we listened to an NPR podcast, which is National Public Radio. It was about 3 minutes and 42 seconds. It'll be linked in my discussion with everything else. And it was about personal rapid transportation. And they loved this podcast. They loved that they got to learn about it. They didn't even know it was a thing. So, and I really didn't even know it was a thing before I found the podcast. So they were really engaged with this. I was really, really happy. And so we listened to the podcast, and then I had my picture pop up, or I had my line pop up, and it said, "What is personal rapid transportation?" And I had 3 kids, I think, answer. They all did really well. And then we talked about why we didn't think it would succeed. And some people were saying, if you accidentally got on the wrong car or your plans change suddenly, like you can't. So basically how personal rapid transportation works is, and I really advise you listen to the podcast. It's really good. But you get on a car, so the car directly comes to you on a track, like a train, and then you climb in it, and it takes you straight to your destination. So there's no stops in between, nothing like that. It's not like a subway. And so some of the kids were saying if you got on the wrong car or your plans change suddenly, then you won't be able to get off, then you have to get off and then wait for another car to come pick you up. There's only so many cars available, and so some of the kids were saying, like, if you were late and you needed a car but you had to wait for one, like, it would make you even more late. So they just had, those are the 2 that I remember off the top of my head, so they just had some really good points about it. The ones that are actually listed in the transcript of the podcast, they don't actually say it in the podcast. Train and like subway owners aren't buying into it, and to replace all of public transit with this personal rapid transportation would cost so much money. It's honestly just not even cost effective. So where the interviewer did the podcast at was actually Morgantown University, I believe. And so it worked for a university, but as far as replacing our whole transportation system with it, the kids were like, it ain't gonna work. They thought it was a good idea because you don't have to make stops in between, so you aren't sitting on something for, 25, 30 minutes or even longer than you need to be. They thought it was more efficient than everybody driving their cars around, which makes sense. It saves money in terms of if you're a college student, like parking costs money. Cowley is one of the only ones I know of that's free. I know Newman will charge me to park. So a lot of places aren't free to park, a lot of universities, and so this would make more sense because you don't have to pay for parking. You just get on your personal rapid transportation and you go to class. So that is what we talked about with the personal rapid transportation, and I'll come back around. But anyway, so that was that. And so then I had the activity time slide pop up, and of course everybody gets very excited when an activity time slide pops up. And so I had each of these appear one by one on Click, so I could very slowly go through it, make sure everybody was paying attention. So I assigned them in groups of 3 or 4. So in those partners, they were already sitting at desks, and so I just said, this group is this group is this group, and that's kind of just how I grouped them. I just grouped them really loose, really fast. And then I told them, your group will be given a question, and you'll be required to work with your group to answer it, and I made them put it on Google Slides. And then I told them you can use whatever themes, fonts, colors, and pictures you want for your project. After we were done, each group told us a little bit about their slide. And then I was going to have them document their online sources, and I'll explain why it didn't work. But I did friendly remind them that Wikipedia is not a source. And so here I linked my instructions. It won't work since it's not in present mode, but I linked my instructions, and then this grading rubric that you see I forgot to take it off of my original PowerPoint. So when I originally set up this whole lesson plan, I set it up for 3 days and all that, and I'll try to pull up my lesson plan in a second. But I had it set up so it went over 3 days, and like they had a ton of time to work on it, and it was actually originally set up where you worked in partners. So the partners you had for your game was your partners for your project. And they would work on all of the questions in one Google slide presentation. But that didn't work because I was working on a time constraint. I didn't have 3 days to teach it. So I changed it a little bit, and I'll explain how I changed it in a second. So these were my instructions. So I just made a copy of my original instructions, and then I just changed it so I still had the original set. And I'll put the original set along with the copy set as a link on the discussion. So I said, for this assignment, you and a group will be breaking down the different aspects of transportation. You will need to create your portion in the presentation in Google Slides, and then each group will share what they learned with the class. So group 1 did what are the modes of transportation, tell us what falls in each category, and a little bit about each mode. Another group did the annual cost of each mode and then which one was most efficient. Group 3 did, on average, how many people use different modes of transportation, which I didn't anticipate this question to be so hard to find, but it really was. But they found something like 8 billion people or something use cars, which I thought was really interesting. And then briefly describe the history of transportation. So basically, like, we started on feet, and then we went to bicycles, and like so on and so forth. So they did like the evolution of transportation. And then what are the accident statistics? And one of the kids was like, I didn't realize there were like so many accidents in transportation. So anyway, they found that really cool. And then this was my actual grading rubric that I made when I originally made this lesson plan. Like, I was going to grade it. And so I'm not going to go over this whole thing. I'm going to link it in the discussion board so you can read it for yourself if you would like. So basically, I just went through, and each one of these boxes was a point off the original transportation project that they were going to do. So when you look at it, make sure you're looking at it with the original copy of transportation, not the one that I used in class, so not the one with groups. So I just went through and I basically lined out, like, you get 5 points if you did this, 1 point if you did this, and it just kind of, I just kind of went through like that. It was really simple. I really didn't know how to make a rubric, so I just kind of I winged it. Like, I did what I know how to do, and I kind of looked at some of my rubrics from college and stuff, and so I was like, I think this is how I make one. So that's how I made it. And then, let me see. This is my original lesson plan. It pops up here. So I ended up making another lesson plan, and it had the applied version, so what I actually applied in class. Wants to update my word. So you can see that very originally from the beginning, I was actually going to have them create flip books. And they were going to have to respond on a wiki page about what they learned in class and to summarize their learning. However, I quickly realized there was no good way on the internet to make a flip book. I probably searched the internet for 45 minutes and did not find anything efficient. And then my wiki, you can't set one of those up unless you're in a school. Like, it was ridiculous. So I changed it, and it became in green font. So my theory lesson plan was that they would be partnered up. They would make those Google Slides that we talked about, but they would make the whole presentation. And then I changed it for what was actually applied in the classroom. So putting them in the groups, and then they talk about their one thing that they were assigned. To assess their learning, I couldn't really use technology. I kind of could, so that's kind of what the purpose of the Google Slides was. But I quickly realized that when I'm working, because my whole lesson was 42 minutes. And so I quickly realized that in order for me to assess their learning, when their group presented, each person in the group just told me something they learned, which was a lot easier than trying to figure out how to document it in technology. Especially since I was working in a time constraint. I think if I wasn't working in a time constraint, it wouldn't have been as hard. So overall, what I brought back from this was you can't do everything in 45 minutes. And I think I made some really good adjustments. I was really happy with how my lesson plan went. I was very concerned. I do a lot of small groups, so I'm used to implementing lesson plans, but I'm usually teaching like 6 or 7 students. It's a lesson plan she's already designed, all that. So for me to just like do it all on my own was like, it was crazy. So overall, I'm really happy with how the lesson went. The kids were really well behaved. If I could go back and reteach it and change some things, I would probably read the transcript from the podcast. We wouldn't listen to it. So there is a transcript with the podcast. So if you don't have time to listen to it, like read the transcript because you actually learn a lot. So I would probably read the transcript. We'd put it on the overhead, which is obviously how this is presented. And we would present it. I would just read it that way because I think that would have saved us a lot of time. I probably wouldn't have let so many students answer questions. So I did not want anybody to feel like they were being left out. And since these are kids that I work with 5 or 6 hours a week, like I've developed relationships with them. And so I didn't want anybody to feel like they were being left out. So I let too many students answer questions when I really should have cut it off at like 2. So that's something else I would change to help my time constraint. I would try to find a way to link them to a resource. So what I mean by that is like I would find all the resources for their answers, and then I'd find a way to link it to them. That way they just had to read it and put it in a PowerPoint. Because trying to send them onto the internet to find it, even when I had 2 kids working on research and 2 kids working on typing, like it was still not enough. So I had like 2 or 3 groups that weren't able to finish, which was fine. Like they weren't being graded on the fact that they could do it. So that was not my concern. But I felt bad that not all of them got it done. And so I think that those are like the main things I would change if I represented this lesson plan. But overall, I was actually really happy with how it went. I didn't have any technology issues, which thank God. To implement and to summarize their learning online, what I did, I don't think I showed it. So what I did was on the original one, my original layout for the 3rd grade, they were going to do, 1, 2, 3 were the same. So 1 was the modes of transportation, 2 was the annual cost, 3 was actually 5 laws attached to transportation, because I thought laws were important, but honestly, it was not very easy for me to work in a group setting, which is why I chose not to do it. And then there are 4 slides, which each partner was going to take a slide, and they were going to summarize what they learned, and then they were going to tell me about their favorite mode of transportation and why. So to summarize their learning through technology, that's how I would do it and how I would change it. However, when it's not your classroom and you're working in a time constraint, it was really difficult. And so that's why I chose to assess their learning the way I did. I kind of worked on the fly on that one. So overall, I was really happy with it. I think I threw together a pretty good lesson plan. I probably put 6 hours of time at least into just re-editing lesson plans. I probably put over 2 hours into my PowerPoint and then re-editing my PowerPoint. I put almost 2 hours into the rubric because I had no idea what I was doing, so it took me extra time. So, I mean, I'm really happy, and I think I put in the appropriate amount of work to make my lesson successful, and I had quite a few kids at the end tell me it was so much fun, and I learned so much, and so that, for me, was really all the clarification I needed that my lesson plan succeeded. So, like I said, everything will be linked in my discussion board, so you can go and look at it leisurely if you so choose. But since I couldn't actually share my video, I only got to share it with Julie. So since I didn't get to share my video with you guys, I at least wanted to walk you through what I actually did in the classroom, because it was definitely a lot different to do it in a classroom setting than just like make it. It was totally crazy.